You're nearing the end of camp, or at least the middle of week 2. I guess to introduce myself, I'm the managing director here at Victory Briefs. So I'm behind the scenes, making sure we take care of the staff, making sure things make sense for the schedule, making sure all that stuff. Also in charge of all the publishing things too, so the briefs you see, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in my second life, I am a college admissions coach. And I work with 2 national/international consulting firms as one of their consultants. But I've also worked with debaters and non-debaters for the last 19 years, getting them into the highest of the highest colleges, be it medical school, law school, business school, and lots of undergrads. So I've worked with a lot of people who have gotten into Stanford. I have a particular way of thinking about college admissions that's a little bit radical. It may even upset your parents, some of the things I want to say in this room. That is intentional, but it's also accurate. So, in terms of this session, it's about telling you, I think there's a distinction between what college admissions is and what people think it is. So we're going to talk about the first. And I know that for the LDers in the room, right, like this is the topic. So we'll get into that. So the thesis of this presentation is that it's not enough to be competitive to get into high-level colleges, but you have to be compelling. We'll talk about what those words mean in a moment. So I'm going to start with talking about that distinction. We're also going to talk about what colleges actually value and what is the goal of an admissions committee. This is going to be a little surprising. It's not exactly what your peers think. And then I'll talk about some tactical things, like specific tactics. And hopefully we can save half the time for any questions you have. Does that sound good, everyone? All right, so there's 2 words. The LDers who are working on, on the topic, competitive. This distinction is pretty important. And if you work with, people who get paid 100, 200, like myself, we use these 2 terms to describe an applicant to college. Being competitive versus being compelling. Competitive, well, let me ask you, what are some things that a person has to do to be competitive? Yeah.
Like have a good GPA,
okay.
Good test scores, probably be involved in a fair amount of extracurriculars. Just like the standard box checks.
Yep. Yes.
I was gonna say have a good SAT, ACT.
And this is the LD topic, right? Like whether or not that should even be there. I'll talk about test scores in a moment.
Write a good essay.
Yeah, a good essay. Hi, what's your name?
Lawrence.
Okay. So, I think that's right. The key word that I heard was box checking. I'm glad you said that. This is where people spend 90 to 98% of their time. Right? Like, I don't need to tell you what you've already heard, right? I mean, someone said on Facebook, well, my parents tell me you can't get into an Ivy League school if you don't have a 1550. The admissions coach in me laughs hysterically at how silly that statement is. And a lot of parents say this. I've even had students I work with where I tell the parent, I am not going to work with you if you don't stop terrorizing your child. They have a 1530. Shh, be quiet. The reason I say that, and I'm pretty harsh sometimes, is because this is where all of your colleagues are going to spend their time. This is the box where people, especially in very competitive schools, will say, well, we think we know who the best 3 people in this high school are, and they're definitely getting into Harvard. Or they're definitely getting into Wharton. Hi, what's your name?
Hi, sorry, Alex Wexler.
Got it. And inevitably, those people who are preordained by their peers to be the best students don't get that. I worked with one student, I won't hide the information for privacy. They were a debater of mine who was a hardcore partier. And in a very super nastily competitive high school in Northern California. The parents said, I don't know if our child's gonna even get into any schools. You have really bad grades. So I'm like, show me the transcripts. There were like 4 A- and the rest were A's. But in that school, not even the top 10%. Further, they were a debater, but they were a good debater. They weren't like national championship level. And everyone in the school said, this person's not getting in a ward. They're not getting in, they're not getting in. And then when the admissions came out, they got in. Completely shocked the parents, completely shocked the school. There were people who were in uproar about it, and I said, it's not that surprising, just write an interesting essay. And don't say the kind of stuff your classmates say. Right, so don't just box check. So what normally happens is that students will say things like, I'm going to say I like math and science because I think that's what colleges want to hear. Relevant phrase? I think that's what colleges want to hear. If you want a quick rejection letter from a top 50 school, think like that. So, because it's competitive, right? Like, you may have good scores, you may play the part, you may conform, but it's not compelling. And compelling is easier to describe by example. Imagine it's a Saturday night. Imagine that you have 3 children who are running all across, I want you to put yourself in that mindset. They're running all across the apartment. You have a stack of 200 essays and files, and you got to pick 10 during the committee for conversation. How do you feel if you're in that moment? Yeah.
If I read 50 essays,
Mm-hmm.
the 10 of them that like actually engage me
Mm-hmm.
and that are like different and interesting and that I haven't
Mm-hmm.
read before,
Yeah.
are probably like, unless one of them says like, I'm applying to your school because I want to get drunk and like fuck off. Like,
Yeah.
obviously I'm not going to pick that one, but
Mm-hmm.
like the ones that aren't like the other ones are
Yeah.
the ones that I'm
Yeah. You're speaking, exactly. Has this person connected to me as a human being? Do I care what they have to say? Are they actually speaking about who they are? Or are they speaking about what they think the mask should look like? Colleges don't have this sense of like, we want you to be super prim and proper and look a certain way and have a certain attitude, so like everyone else. Nah. So compelling, right? It's uniqueness. It's, I would argue, other values, right? Like authenticity. This is where colleges say, you want to know who you really are. They mean it. They want to know who you really are. They want to know the part of yourself that your parents don't want to see. They want to know the part of yourself that is like the way you would act if you were in a dorm room or in a classroom. Because if you were a college admissions officer, think about all the things you have to factor in. You are letting the students who forever be responsible for your brand. A student does something stupid, guess who gets called out? The college. Right? So you have to give them the information they need to really figure out what makes you tick. Which is not the same thing as the kind of things you can say to your friends in high school. It's not the same thing that your parents will ever want to hear. They're very, very different. So we're going to go into some of the details of the competitive, compelling distinction, in order to kind of set the framework, which is you have to be competitive. Like, you have to get the numbers and the scores. But that's only 5% of the game. The rest of the game is how do we make ourselves look like unique people. So let's transition over to the role of a college admissions committee, rather, admissions director. What do you think would happen if that director accepted students who had all perfect SATs or perfect GPAs? Yeah.
Fill the class like 80 times.
Mm-hmm. That's the first problem. So even if everyone's, and here's a word I hate hearing and I make fun of, qualified, you still have to reject most of those people. So even that doesn't get you there. What else do you think would happen? Yeah.
Students would go on to do like similar things in life because like what they're achieving is very not generic, but it's what like thousands, if not tens of thousands of other kids are achieving. Like I think they're trying to create diversity not only in like what a student looks like, but like what they want to achieve.
Yep. And there's another comment in the back.
It would just be very bland and very boring.
Mm-hmm. And that admissions director would be fired. Fire. Because the goal of an admissions committee, here comes tip number 1, It's really, really important how to get this in your head. Because this sets up what you have to do if you're doing an application. So for the LDers in that room, right, when negatives start talking about, well, we need people who can maximize your potential academic performance. That's not what college directors are looking for. So colleges want the best class, not the best students. Now this is where we're in radical land. Because your parents may tell you, you need to be the best student, you need to have the highest grades, you need the highest SAT scores. But the admissions committee, they're not evaluated by, did the highest performing students get in the class? They're evaluated by, what did they tell the provost or the president about the incoming class of students? Notice the language I use here. The incoming class, the collective. So there is no conversation about who are the most qualified students. The conversation is, how good is the class? Right? So there's no rank ordering. Right? There will be people who have a 1200 who will get into Harvard. And you know Harvard's answer is going to be? Darn straight. We think they're going to be the next Obama or Oprah Winfrey. Harvard Business School is very brash. They'll take someone with a C average, happily. Yep, I said it. Because they're going to think, oh, this person started 3 businesses and was on Shark Tank. That's worth an exception. So how does this happen? Well, if you're trying to form the best class, the comment you made, right, or you both made, you have to pick, the goal here is, imagine it like this. There's a billion different ways of being successful, and it's hard to know where the most successful people are going to be, right? So what they're trying to do is future cast. Who do they think are the applicants who will fill all the goals of the university, and also 10, 20 years down the line are the kinds of people who will win Nobel Prizes, who will be, I'm not kidding, country music stars, who will be running for politics, who will be working at a KIPP school, working for underprivileged populations. That's what they're really looking for. So what they do is often the term cherry picking. They want the best from every possible population at all the ranges of the scale. Because they can't say only the people who have the best grades are going to capture all the kinds of talent that we need in the classroom. Nor do test scores tell them, for example, are you the kind of student that a professor would say, I want to write a paper with that person? 2 different skill sets. So for affirmatives, who are LDers, that's one big argument about testing. Tests do a crappy job of predicting the qualitative components that colleges need in order to fulfill their stakeholders, particularly professors, other peers, the corporation that really cares about the class. Like, you'll be fired if all you do is get kids with the highest test scores or who are the most qualified. So what does this have to do with you? Well, the question you should ask yourself in an admissions application is, let me pause for a second. What are you going to add to the class that will make it better? Let me give you a little bit of a hint. When you do get accepted to a college, you're probably going to go to an orientation meeting where they'll put you in like a church or some kind of super fancy room. The whole class will be there. The dean or the provost will stand up there, the chest out, and they'll say, this year's class, we have people from all 50 states. We have people who got a gold medal at the X Games. We have someone who did 1,000 hours of community service and won an Eagle Scout. We have someone who can speak 5 languages. We have someone who is a League of Legends world champion. No, I'm not kidding. That can get you into college very easily. I'll give you an example in a moment. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what do I add to that speech? If you don't add anything to that speech, no one cares how good your grades are. You will be read, you'll be competitive, but you'll then be thrown out. So what are some of the ways that you can be this compelling applicant? So, the first, I'm going to talk about a concept that Stanford has. So, as I told you, I've gotten a lot of people in that school. And this concept is where a lot of their competitors fail. Like, tell it like. So Stanford has 3 criteria: your academic performance, your personal traits, and intellectual vitality. Intellectual vitality means, are you the kind of person who learns because you're legitimately curious? Do you do work after getting the A because you're just darn interested? They actually say it here in their literature. They say, we're interested in what people write on your behalf. We're interested in, the enthusiasm that will allow you to spark a lively discussion in a freshman seminar and continue the conversation at a dinner table. They're not kidding. I went to Stanford. They have a whole program called Structural Liberal Education. They take in about 300 students. And quite literally, you have a bunch of kids who went to class for 2 hours, who are so excited about the Odyssey and some interesting interpretation, they will then go to the dining hall and argue about it for hours. This is the school that created Google. That has Stanford students who use linear algebra and Lagrange multipliers to create the Google thing, right? That's their culture, which is your second tip. So, second tip is colleges have identities. They are unique beasts. They have a culture. So one thing that a lot of people do in their essays, they'll say lines like, I want to go to a top 10 school, and that's why I want to apply to Harvard. That is the equivalent of you asking someone out for homecoming, telling that person, yeah, I really want to ask you because I really want to meet someone who's as pretty as you are. How would you feel about that? Yeah, I saw your face. What would be your reaction?
Be like, no way.
Exactly. You're like, that's offensive. Are you kidding me? But people write that all the time in their college application essays. And they say that in interviews. So imagine if you're talking to someone from Yale, and they're super, the people who are doing admissions interviews, they're doing this for free, so they really love their school, and they're so excited about it, and they're like, I want to meet the next cool person I could talk about, and then that person's like, yeah, I want to go to Yale because I just want to go to an Ivy. And it's like, facepalm. You just failed your interview, right? But the way that people, so there's a distinction here. I get there are many people who are like, I just want to apply to all the Ivies and get in. I respect that. But you don't say it, right? What you say instead are hyper-specific things that actually relate to what you want out of a college. So some things I have my clients do, I'll tell them, hey, what do you want out of college? And I'll press them. Do you want to be in a city? What don't you want in a college, right? What would you hate? Don't apply there, or at least, come up with another story, right? Having the story as to why you would fit and you would be happy in that school. So for example, when I applied to Duke and got a full ride, I was saying things like, hey, I do a lot of critical theory, I know you have professors in these fields, these are the clubs I would join, here's the evidence of the things I've already done that I could continue doing in college. That's one model that you can use. I've already done X, going to your college will allow me to do X times 2. That's one strategy in essays you can do. So find the evidence in your own experience, and then argue why specifically that college would accelerate what you're already doing. The reason this is helpful is because it leads to fears. Fear A is that you're going to come and hate it and fail, right? You're going to fail personally or fail academically. No one wants that. Colleges don't want crappy alumni because crappy alumni don't pay money. They don't donate. They got it from the self-interest from the college. And B, it convinces them that you're not BSing. If I can say you did a particular thing and you put time into it and you thought about what they have in that field, then that's a much more authentic answer than someone who's like, well, I just want to go to Stanford because everyone does comp sci. Okay? Congratulations. Half the freshman class took intro to comp sci every year. What's interesting is I know there's these things you do in computer science that's different from MIT, like parallel programming. I specialize in that. I did this work on my own, without a grade. That kicks into the intellectual vitality argument, but it also kicks into something you actually already want to do. So, when say colleges have identities, the extension of this point is that you do too. Right? So the question you have to ask yourself is, what are the things that you want to do, and how will the college help you? That becomes one model you can put in an essay. Another thing, next tip. It's not what you do, but how much value do you bring? One flaw that people often do in their admissions applications is that they'll do their resume and they'll be vice president and president of 10 clubs. You know what do you think an admissions officer sees when they see that?
Ah, they are trying to make themselves look good for this application.
Yes, and it's even worse than that. Yeah.
They'll tell me they're doing it to check off boxes rather than showing, like, rather than pursuing a specific passion, because chances are they don't have passions in these 10 different fields. I think they want to see consistency with what you're signing up for.
Yeah, yeah.
And they also would probably be like, if you were like president or vice president of all these clubs, you're probably spending an equal amount of time on every one of them.
Yeah, yep. So the question I would have in terms of complex and comments is, what value did you bring? You're not going to get in because you were student government president. You're going to get in because you were student government president and you were such a badass that you actually created real change that has impacted students for the next 20 years. That could get you in. But doing student body president, no one cares. Like, you're part of Key Club, congratulations. What value did you bring as a Key Club member? You do debate. Okay, you broke, sure. What's the value of that? Like, what are you adding? So I'm not writing an essay about debate, and I've worked with a lot of these. The C answer is debate teaches me speaking and makes me more confident, and I went from not winning to winning my first tournament, and that's my essay. The A answer would explain why you care about this thing, what in your personal background comes to it, and even better, if you're showing that you're bringing this and teaching other populations or people, then becomes an interesting story. So someone, for example, who's actually gone to prisons to teach inmates how to debate. Don't shock you. But that is a pretty badass story. Someone who teaches all their novices and then spends their free time driving to middle schools to teach those students how to do debate, and then they end up going to middle school nationals. That is a very distinctive argument. So how do we explain this, get at this value term? I'm going to steal a concept from an author named Cal Newport. I'll write his name. He's awesome. You should read all of his stuff. And there are two books you should read. Oh, one in particular, How to Be a High School Superstar. So, first problem. A lot of high schoolers work really hard. They don't sleep. They write in their essays, I'm such a hard, diligent worker. I'm always working. You know the answer that I would have as an admissions officer? You're not efficient. The goal is not for you to work yourself to death, to do every possible AP, which is a common trick, but to add value. So, because when you're in college, there's no effort points. There are no binder checks. There's none of that. It's just, what is the value? What's the output? In order to seem as valuable, you have two things. And this is what he calls the unintended superstar effect. Either you do something extraordinary or something ordinary in an extraordinary way. And this should guide your essay writing. Do something extraordinary, do something that I'm like, how the hell do you ever possibly do that? If I can't predict or imagine how you did something, it becomes super powerful and persuasive. So one thing I always like to say, for example, when people are like, I hate affirmative action, my argument to those students is not affirmative action's a problem, it's that you're not distinctive. Like, you suck. Get better. Because the affirmative action, the way it works, is that someone who's African American and male from an underprivileged neighborhood with a 1300 is not that they, because they're black, it's because I can't imagine how you get that score when your parents are beating you every day, when no one in your family has gone to college, when there are people who are being shot in your neighborhood. That's how they get in. It's not affirmative action per se. This is how, someone, a woman who's an expert at computer science, who can code in 4 different languages gets in, even if she has a much lower SAT score. Because the admissions office is like, there's so much sexism in computer science. The fact that you're to put up with all that crap and still produce and write code and get internships means that something in you is going to be the next, Bill Gates. That's how they're thinking. Doing extraordinary things that are hard to explain. The key phrase you should write down is hard to explain. Yeah?
Is doing something extraordinary, is that reflected in showing excellence in something, or is it taking something, like the way you're talking about somebody in debate, is it reflected by somebody who wins, who's the TOC champion, or is it reflected more in somebody who goes to prisons and teaches somebody to debate?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, it's the 2 prongs. The prison's example, do something extraordinary, or a high level, or do something ordinary in an extraordinary way. So winning the TUC, that's something ordinary in an extraordinary way. There's another component here that's not in Newport's argument. It's hyper self-awareness and the ability to think in a clever way. Explain something in a way that is super smart and super aware that I would not expect out of a high schooler. So if you're going to talk about debate, say something interesting about it. If you're going to, for example, if you're a football player and somehow make an argument as to what music teaches you about being a football player and how you've adjusted your strategy as a football player based on your understanding of insert music term here, and you have some credibility behind you and you've taken AP music theory, then you become the person who an admissions office is like, that's my kind of football player. Then you get in with the same activity. So, an example I want to give you is this gentleman. So, you don't have to really see a lot of it, but what are they doing?
Tetris?
Not just Tetris. The 1980s Tetris. Tetris that was around before any of you were born. It is really bleeping hard, right? And what you're seeing in this picture, there are 7.8 million views since last summer. What happened is the guy on the left was a 16-year-old named Joseph Salih. He was competing in this tournament called the Classic Tetris World Championship. The guy on the right, 7-time world champion out of 9 years it's existed. And this student on the left, he made history because he beat the guy on the right in a 3-0 in finals. It was all over the news. All over. It was on HuffPo, it was on anything you can imagine. If that student has high grades, they're getting into Harvard and MIT at will. Because it's something that is hard to explain and hard to do. It's like, how could a 16-year-old beat a 7-time world champion and just spank them? And if you look at the rest of the video, I mean, people in the audience are roaring. They're clapping for 3 to 5 minutes. And I want you to kind of think about this for a moment. Social psychology time. When this student applies, and they're going to, by the way, pro tip, you will expect to be Googled, and make sure you have a professional email address. pimptown82@gmail now. These things count. For people to check your Facebook too, by the way. There were some students who got in on Harvard and had their applications rescinded because they said a whole bunch of racist, stupid stuff on an online post and it got leaked. So don't do dumb things. I don't think you would, but I gotta say it anyway. But when this person gets Googled, they're gonna see this video, they're gonna see a whole bunch of people roaring, and then the announcer's like, I can't believe this 16-year-old. So, what does that mean? And this is another term. External validation. Remember, you can be telling me whatever you want about how awesome you are and how great you are, but if I have other people who I can trust, who will not lie to me, then what you're doing is more persuasive to me. This is why teacher recommendations are super critical. Because teachers are going to be like, and they're very honest, by the way. Teachers will say, oh, this is a good student, they work hard. That's a C answer. This is a good student, they work hard, and I would, you'd be dumb not to take them. Here's 18 reasons why. Here's some specific stories. Here's a paper they wrote. That's more like an A will get you in a school answer. I'll give you an example of a recommendation letter I saw from a student who got into Columbia full ride that I worked with. They were an Eagle Scout and did a whole bunch of community service. But the teacher said, I'm trying to hide information, but the teacher said, when this person had their Eagle Scout ceremony, they made such an impact to the community that 200 people from across the city showed up just to thank him. They got in. External validation, right? Other people who don't have anything in the fight were like, we love this person has done something big, and hence to an admissions office that says, I can feel more confident that this person will add to this class. I want this kind of person there. In Cal Newport book, he talked about a student who had a very relaxed, slightly above average GPA, only 2 APs a year, didn't stay up late ever, but got in because she did work on snow crabs. Snow crab, yeah, I'm not kidding. She worked with a marine biologist about snow crabs. And when she did her interview, guess what the interviewer would talk about? Snow crabs. Like, what? It's unintended superstar effect. Why would a 16-year-old think about snow crabs during their summer? And that becomes interesting. Because that's the kind of stuff where I can see a professor saying, hey, do you want to do this research with me about the mating patterns of snails and get published? And by the way, that kind of stuff does work in college admissions because if you get published, that gets more points for tenure, which helps the U.S. News and World get where I'm going. So when we look at our activities, don't think, let me do what everyone else is doing. Think, how can I upscale what I'm doing? How can I make it more, how can I produce more? So here's some specifics. Number 1, expand the range of who you help and who you work with. Often the higher the scale, the better. So if it's outside of a high school, even better. If you can help or teach others, that's always a plus factor. If you can get press for what you're doing, that also helps. Let me give you an example. So my debate coach, I love him to death, and I'm going to be teaching for him, and coaching for him. What he would do after, let's say, my senior year, when I got my first 2 bids, my senior year, he would take the trophy, go to the all high school assembly, and present it to the headmaster in front of everyone. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is so nerdy. But what I realized is that when he started doing that, all of my scores went up in English. Why do you think that happened? Or could happen, yeah.
Confidence?
Because they're only studying the paper.
The way your teachers are viewing you.
Social psychology again. And, also, so I'm getting validation. And also the people who are writing my letters, they're already, that shows in their letters. Clearly I'm hearing a lot about this person all the time. I don't really know what it's about, but clearly this person is someone I need to take seriously and write a letter that reflects that. So it's a way to rate your recommendation letters, is that you give the evidence of this external validation as much as possible. A few other things you could do. One thing is, as debaters, it drives me insane that debaters don't apply for the various speech writing contests, speech contests, alternate debate contests. Because if you win any of those things, that's the external validation. Not only could you make money, but that's the external validation that no one else has. So for example, when I applied, I loved writing, so I wrote haiku. One of my haiku won a high school scholarship in a global haiku journal. That's hard to explain. That's pretty extraordinary. Why would someone do that? I applied to every writing competition I could. And ended up winning 3 or 4 of them. So those are things that would make you think, I'm not, yeah, there are a lot of people who have 1600s, but there are very few people who have a demonstrated, externally validated skill like writing. Which, hint, hint, colleges are always looking for really good writers. They're desperate for them. Super desperate. So any evidence that someone's saying that you're a great writer or you're a great speaker goes a long way. And the other thing you can do is do your own marketing. So if you're doing something awesome, create a blog. Do a YouTube. Talk to people in the community you can work with over multiple years. So is anyone here like younger than a junior? Good job, you're here. Because some of this stuff, it takes time, right? Find someone you can work with and do your own side projects, and then that could be your third letter. That's external validation. So I mean, and also for everyone in the room, you should go to the the NSDA's website. They have a whole list of competitions. There's something that just came up called the Coolidge Cup. You should apply and compete.
What is it?
It's like a public forum style debate that just started. There are various tournaments throughout the year that can qualify for it, but there are also regional competitions.
What's the name again?
The Coolidge Cup? That's one example. Go to the NSDA's website and look up debate competitions and scholarship. You'll see a lot of ads for these things. When in doubt, apply. That's the philosophy. Apply. Because here's the thing, that's the kind of behavior that if you want to be a superstar in college, you have to have that kind of drive. A few other things, examples, the National Legion oratorical contest. That's a biggie. You win it, you get 18K, but even if you don't win it, if you advance anywhere, that's a line on a resume that shows that you have that kind of skill. Another example, I think there's something called the Voice of Democracy contest by the VFW. Again, these are all things I did myself. And they add unique lines. All right, so I'll end this rant with a few specific tactical tips. So first thing, it's an application of the superstar effect. So I'm going to give you an example of an essay that you'll often see a version of. Duke had an essay that I answered called, Name a book you have enjoyed and why. So applying the superstar effect, most students are going to think, let me pick a book that we read in English class, because they're going to want to hear about that. They're going to expect me to say something from English class. And that often leads to F-quality essays. So, for example, I want to write about Pride and Prejudice, or I want to write about The Great Gatsby. The problem isn't that you're writing about those things. The problem is people write about these things with their brains shut off. So a good version, doing something ordinary in an extraordinary way, is to find something very interesting or a spin or a perspective that makes sense to you and explain it. So if we're talking about The Great Gatsby, and those of you who like your capitalism critiques, right? Make an interesting connection between those two things. Like the importance of materialism, right? The importance of how this changes how people are perceived in society. That could be a good essay. Or write about something that's completely extraordinary. In my case, when I answered this question, I talked about a book called Oxford's Tale, which was about an African American in the 19th century who had the experience of passing as different races based on where he was, and he was able to do that because he was biracial. And talked about the psychological trauma of that, and my essay was about, well, I live in the ghetto, and I get bused to a super private school, and like the character, I'm trying to negotiate not fitting either of those two worlds. It hits the superstar effect because it's an unusual answer that says something about who I am that's different. Now to kind of put this in your head, when you write your essays, you're working on them, I want you to put yourself in this position. What will often happen in admissions offices is that they will come, let me give you another book. It's called Admissions Confidential. You can get it on Amazon. LDers, you should just read this book. You may not be able to card it, but you should read it. Want to understand admissions quickly and how it really works. Often, if you YouTube inside the admissions room, you'll see this. It'll be a bunch of people in a circle, and they'll summarize a file, and an admissions officer will come in and say, here are my 10 people I want to present for us to consider, up or down. And at the end of that discussion, they will say, how many to admit? Raise your hand. How many to reject? How many to waitlist? So you want to say something that will get all the people in that room to be like, oh my God, if we don't have this person, we will never find them again. In the Admissions Confidential book, the author talks about how sometimes admissions officers, when they really love a student, will bake a set of brownies to sweeten up and bribe the committee. I'm not kidding, these kind of things do happen in admissions committees. So what can you do that makes them want to do that for you, right? And this is when, the vulnerability is another word here that I would use. What I say to people is, if you write your essay and you don't feel somewhat scared or uncomfortable, you failed. Because you're hiding. So you should be able to say things about yourself where you feel like you've opened up your heart to the person. And I'm not saying tragedy and crying, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean quite literally the soul searching that happens when you're like, I want this person to know who I am at a very intimate level. One example in a YouTube clip of one of those inside the admissions room was an essay talking about, I'm probably going to screw up the example, a Muslim woman who felt ashamed to be part of her family because everyone in the community found out that her dad just got a divorce because the dad was cheating with a prostitute. And everyone in the room, you'll see in the clip, was like, oh my goodness. They're like, she can put up with some stuff in life. Like, she's going to have a tough backbone, right? Like, I can trust this person can be very grounded. And they're like, we're taking her. All of us, we're taking her, right? The point is not that the story is ridiculous, but the fact, what does it say about the person? Now, that's the other thing to keep in your heads. What does this argument or this example say about me in terms of so they can know who I am? Final 2 tactical tips. 1, avoid cliches. Any quick saying, don't say it. Like, I'm hardworking, diligent, passionate. Those are words that probably never should be in your essays. So that's the first place when I look at essays, I just scratch it out. So any kind of quick turns of phrase or idioms should never be in your writing. Because it means you're hiding. You're not explaining things as well on YouTube. Second tip, find 3 or 4 teachers who love you. Yes, I'm going to say that again. 3 to 4 teachers who love you. And by love, I mean they know who you are inside out. You've had conversation with them. They feel emotionally invested in you. You are actually their friend. The younger you are, the easier this is. But it's forming a relationship with them over time. What most applicants do is that they're like, oh, I got an A from them, so they're going to write me a good letter. It's, I got an A from them, and we've talked, and they know what I care about, and we actually have a connection together. That's what inspires me to write much better letters, much more personal letters. A sub-point to this is that anytime you ask for a recommendation letter, you should give the teacher information because it makes it easier on them. So for example, I would say your resume, all your activities, give them like 2 pages of like, this is my essay and here's the story I'm telling. Here's some examples of work we've done together. If you have the assignments, like if you know you're about to ask someone for a letter, keep the assignments and give them to the teacher. Imagine what it's like when a teacher says, write a 10-page paper. How do you feel? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I have to do this from scratch. That's how most high schoolers treat their teachers. So don't do that. The more you give them, the more they're going to be like, thank God. I can just pull lines from the essay. I can pull things from what they said here, right? And then they can actually spend the time trying to say, I love this person, it's the best person I've ever seen in my life, versus having to come from scratch. It's a place that most admissions students fail. They miss it. And the earlier the better, right? So don't do it near the deadline. Don't do it when everyone else is giving them stuff. Like, do it earlier. Yeah.
Say you formed like a strong relationship with a teacher. You had like early on, like let's say like 8th grade, but they still continue to be a part of like your learning journey. Does that still? Can you ask for a recommendation from them? Like say,
absolutely.
Like my 7th grade debate coach, I judge for every weekend and like continue to like go for advice. Like,
yeah.
The Bible.
That's exactly how you do it. You have 3 to 4 people. Like you should genuinely do it anyway. But longer periods of time give more credibility. right? So like if I've known someone for 5 years, then I'm the admissions officer. I'm gonna trust that person more because I'm gonna be like, they've talked to this person for thousands of hours and have seen them how they are. I can feel confident that they would tell me if they were an axe murderer. Seriously, you're an admission. Think about how your parents feel when you have a friend and they come over. They're giving you the third degree about the person, right? You know, how do you know them? Right? Or if you're dating someone, and they're like, really gets really interesting, right? That's how admissions officers have to feel about their students because they don't know. They don't know anything. All they know is your transcript. They don't know if you're going to be in the news or committing a violent felony. They don't, I mean, this is a real story. They don't know if you're going to be someone in a fraternity who's going to go to a zoo, kill a super endangered species of fish, and cook it. Yes, someone did that. They were on an MTV show called Fraternity Life. Massive, massive, massive drama for the university. Total shame. But the college admissions office didn't know they were that kind of person. Right? So that's why you want letters that are people who know you at a very deep level to hedge off that risk or that concern. Like you want the admissions office to say, they have people who are like put their credibility on the line with a track record to be able to tell a credible story about who you are and the fact that you are super mature and safe and will contribute to the college campus. So if you think about it like that, we're not asking teachers who gave us an A. We're asking teachers who are willing to say, I deeply know this person, and teacher to teacher, they're legit. And here's all the examples. Like you want teachers to be giving specific examples. What are the statements in class they really liked? What are the things that you said in an essay that was particularly unusual, that was worthy of giving you an A+? What were the things you did outside of class with the teacher or conversations you had? The more data you give them, the better that letter looks, because there's a big difference between a 10 out of 10 recommendation letter and a 6. The difference is how specific is it? How much credibility does the teacher have to actually say you're one of the best students they ever saw? Because it's one thing if a teacher says that, and they say that every year, and they've taught for 4 years. It's another if it's a teacher who's a hard grader, has taught for 30 years, has worked with you for 4 years, and says that line. Then my Ivy Leagues are like, we're going to take this really on face value. Like this letter has more credibility. That distinction makes sense? Most people go for the 6 and get a 6 and get rejected. Going for the 10 is a lot more work. Let's see. And the last thing I'm going to say is, do what you want to do. I'll say it again. Do what you want to do. Don't do things you hate. Because increasingly, there used to be this term being well-rounded, and you'll see it on the news, right? Like, colleges are not going for just well-rounded kids. They're going for people who have what we call spikes. 1 or 2 things that are hyper-specialized, but they're good overall. So like I was saying, there are schools that will take you if you're a worldwide League of Legends champion. For the gamers out there, if you're an American and you're globally ranked in StarCraft 2, that could very easily get you into college if everything else in your application is good. Why? Unintended superstar effect. It's really freaking hard for someone in the United States to be amazing at a global level in StarCraft 2. Hard. Damn near impossible. And they're doing something relatively ordinary. They're playing video games, but they're doing it in an extraordinary way. If you're, again, I'm a gamer, so if I saw you, and you're 18, and I saw you on a YouTube clip playing one of the Madden majors, your parents are going to be like, they're playing video games, they're immature. But an admissions officer is going to be like, nah, I can't believe that person applied here. Right? They could create a new esports club at our colleges. By the way, a lot of colleges are trying to do that now. So even things that seem immature or your parents may make fun of can be the kinds of things that can make an admissions office say, we need to take this person and the feeling you need to get in the admissions officer's head is you want them to say, not only do I want them to come, not only do I want them in my class, but I want to talk to them when they get on campus. I'll give a personal example of this. I was applying for a Duke program it was like an MBA recruitment thing, but it was a super competitive application. I was applying as a PhD from Yale, And I just applied, I got in. During one of the last social activities, this really, really tall woman sees me and runs toward me, gives me the biggest hug in the world in front of this really posh hotel. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And she's like, I've read your essay and I've heard about your school. I wanted to make sure to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, I guess you're the one who pulled my application. So it's trying to generate those kinds of feelings in people so that they feel like they care about you, that you care about others, and that you're the kind of person that they want to talk to have dinner with in the dorm. Which I will stop up, that gives about 10 minutes. Like, that is so much different. It's probably entirely different from the way your peers are going to talk about college. That's the point. All right, rant over. It gives about 8 to 10 minutes. Questions? Yeah.
I had a question when you were talking about teacher recommendations. I mean, obviously quality over quantity, but is there value in having perhaps like more teacher recommendations than other applicants?
Not per se. I would say here's my rule, have 4 people who's like and this is for any application you do for the rest of your life. Like law and medicine does not matter. Have about 4 people, like take the number you need and add 1 or 2. I would have 4 people who would be willing to do it. You're not going to ask all 4. 2, and depending on the school, you may need 2 or 3. That gives you a buffer. And if there's someone who's like on, standby, say, hey, I want to respect your time. I know a lot of people are asking you, if another teacher can't do it, can you do it? But you set up those relationships with 4 people so that you have like almost an army ready to help you. But in terms of submitting numbers, no. It was, some schools will just say, just put in 2, and that's fine. It was 2. If you set yourself for 4 great letters, oh, by the way you should ask a letter, you should ask the person, can you write a strong letter of recommendation for me? Notice the word strong there. That's an intentional word. Not just a letter, a strong letter. And you know what happens? You know why people don't ask that? Because they're like, I'm afraid they're going to say no. You know what I'm saying? If they're going to say no, you want to find out now. You should be happy if they say no. What you don't want is someone writing a lukewarm letter and you will never find out about it. Yeah.
Do you ever get teacher recommendations that say bad things about the student?
I have not, but they happen a lot. Because students don't form the relationships. They may have gotten an A, but were a jerk. That happens a lot. They're like, I targeted on this teacher, and I made her go from that 96 to a 99. And I'm like, you idiot. You got 3 more points, and this person's probably going to hate you. I actually had a student once who I literally said, you've been a jerk. The next 6 months is your apology tour. And it's your junior year. Like, I want you to get into a certain school. So you're going to rebuild these relationships and admit your faults and show you're a mature person, and they ended up getting Stanford. But, so it shows that, so yes, because people act in ways that are just, they think short-term, not long-term. They think, I want to get the perfect score. They don't think about the human being who they're about to ask a letter from. So none of these tips will help you if you're a jerk. If you treat other students badly, if you're the person who always talks and not lets other people speak, if you're selfish, that's where recommendations are where teachers keep it real. Because the way the teachers think of it is like teacher to teacher, like friend to friend, like we are on the same team with the admissions committee. Same thing, by the way, with your guidance counselors. They also write things on your behalf, so be nice to them too. Also, sometimes colleges will call people at your school to verify things in your application, like verify what kind of human being you are. So all those relationships are all the people in your high school in administration or whatever, those are all stakeholders. They can all report on you, informally or formally. You seem like a nice group. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. These things count because from the college's standpoint, their butts are on the line. So they're willing to do the Google searches. They're willing to check through your Facebook, even if it's private, they can find out. Yeah.
When you say teachers, could you get teachers who don't work at your school anymore and people who aren't your teachers?
Yes, absolutely. You get people who aren't teachers at all. Like your debate coach could write your 3rd letter. A government official that you've worked with deeply could write your 3rd letter. Yeah. Other questions? We still got 3 minutes. Anything you want? Free coaching. Yeah.
So I'm going into my junior year, and I basically spent the entire summer, like working and then doing SAT prep. What can I do in the rest of my summer before the SAT, other than like obviously scoring well, to do well in my junior year and my senior year in order to get into it?
You're going into junior year?
I'm going into junior year.
Good. You were working. What were you doing?
A law firm. They work. I work specifically for human rights and civil rights law.
Good. Really, really good. Okay. So, number one, Number one, for all of you, you should keep a log of the things you do. The log, literally. Like, how many people do you help? What way? If you're doing debate, you should keep your own data on your own win-loss records and tournaments you've done well, the team situations you've gotten speaker awards. Like, you should be your own data cruncher. For you, I would say, like, jot down notes and examples of interesting scenarios or people you've met that were very formative to you. That becomes, fodder for an essay. Like, I would keep a journal, and I did that when I was writing too. Like, a journal of your thoughts, because that's the stuff you're going to have to come back to that you may forget. If you're going into junior year, I would say, you get your number, but like, this is the time to kind of not just get an A, but generate academic stuff that's outside of class. Right? Work on papers after they're done. Right? Try to get things published with people. Anything that you can do to spread yourself deeper, that's a good year to do it. In other words, do the things that your peers won't do. Like, so just, the more creative, the better. So if it's like, do the kind of stuff that scares you, right? Like, if you're an expert at music theory, write a damn blog. Teach other people music theory, right? Write a textbook. Self-publish the book. We can talk about this in Socrates in terms of specific examples. Like, the term is being generative. Like, how do I generate press? How do I generate value? How do I generate things I can do that I'm self-driving this bus? That's what you can do your junior year. Or even your senior year. And then what ends up happening is that you've rigged your own application. People who are in arts and sciences, for example, there's something called the Scholastic Art, I think something like the Scholastic Arts Competition. Apply. Get a gold medal there, that counts. If you're a dancer and you're of age, show up to So You Think You Can Dance. If you get a golden ticket, remember all the concepts, right? If they're like, we love you, and you're in TV, and they handle those little gold tickets, right, that can get you in. If you have a business that could go in Shark Tank, apply, right? If the sharks say we love you and give you money, that's some hell of external validation. Why? Because of all the things you said here, right? If I'm a missions officer, I'm thinking, this person's 18 years old, they got all these sharks who are nasty and who are just brutal, and they think that you're awesome at business, then clearly me, Warden, is going to trust the sharks and accept you. So my point here is, like, to answer your question, and for all of you, let your imaginations go wild. Like, if you need to cold call 200 people, do it. If you need to Instagram or Twitter people, do it. And if people say no, don't respond, who cares? But if there's any kind of reward for that, or recognition, you're getting any traction whatsoever, or even if you fail on your face, those become the kind of things that are very appealing because very few people have that kind of hustle. It's very rare. But when you have it, everyone's like, I gotta talk to that person. And then you.
Just really quickly, I noticed you're videotaping it. Is there a way we can access this afterwards? Like, does it get posted anywhere, or is it?
It's only gonna be on YouTube.
Okay.
It's on the BBI.
BBI.
Oh, it's on BBI?
Yeah, not this one. Like, this one's not gonna be immediately. It's gonna be like a week or two. The previous college admission strategy module was actually on YouTube from a few years ago. You can watch that too. Yeah.
What would you say like the most important years are like in high school in terms of like building up your resume?
All of them. I'm not trying to be cute. Like, if you're in 9th grade, you should start. If you're 11th grade, start. If 12th grade, start. Just start. There's no priority. The one factor that it doesn't matter is just depth of involvement. So if you do something for 2 years, that's better than 1. That's better than 6 months. But even that's not a rule. So any amount of investment is fine. But don't think that like only 1 year counts. Like multi-years count too.